chapter 253 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Krishna on the battlefield. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna told himself, because of the killing of Shishupala, some of his friends are harassing the city. I am sure of it. When he came home, he heard all about the exploits of Salva. He left Balarama behind in Dwaraka to guard the city and the citizens and hurried to the battlefield. From a distance, the Yadava army saw the Garuda banner fluttering in the distance. Salva saw it too, and both the hosts were happy. The aim of Salva was to kill Krishna, and the Yadavas knew that he would soon be killed, and since Krishna had come on the scene. Salva hurled the fearful Shakti with the intention of killing the charioteer of Krishna. The Shakti was making the earth and the sky glow with its brilliance, and the noise it made while it approached them was like 1,000 thunders crashing together. Krishna broke the Shakti into splinters with his sharp arrows. The arrows released from his bow were flying so fast that they soon covered the chariot Saubha and it could not be seen. Salva hit Krishna's left shoulder with an arrow. So sharp was the pain that Krishna's bow Sharanga slipped from his hand. Salva spoke words which he thought would frighten Krishna. He said, "You stupid fool, I am going to punish you for the many wrongdoings of yours. You are but a common thief, and more than that, you are a cowherd. While we were watching you carried away the wife of Shishupala and made her yours, you ran away instead of winning her by fair fight. And now, what have you done? While he was unprepared for it, you killed my dear friend Shishupala in the Rajasuya hall. I will avenge the death of my friend by killing you with my arrows." Krishna's eyes were flashing fire. He said, "You brag too much. Real heroes do not talk about, but show in action what they mean to do." Even as he was talking, Krishna hit Salva on the chin with his gada. Salva was spitting blood, and when the gada returned to him, Krishna looked again, but Salva had vanished from there with the help of his Maya. When he was trying to locate his enemy, Krishna was stopped by a messenger from Dwaraka. He had run all the distance and he said, "Krishna, Krishna, your mother sent me to you in a hurry. Your father, Vasudeva, has been captured and tied up like a sheep by a butcher." When he heard this, Krishna became extremely despondent like any ordinary mortal afflicted by sorrows and suffering. He said, "How could this coward Salva have managed to defeat my brother Balarama, who is invincible? When such a thing has happened, it is clear that fate singles out some men, even men like my dear brother and father, and makes them suffer humiliations. Fate is the most powerful of all enemies." Salva suddenly appeared before Krishna and he had the captive Vasudeva with him. He said, "Krishna, look, this is the man whom you respect most, your father. I will kill him even while you are looking. If you have strength enough to save him, do it now. Let me see how valiant you are." Before Krishna could touch his bow, Salva cut off the head of Vasudeva, and flying in the air, he entered his chariot, Saubha. Krishna was sunk in awe, but it was only for a while. Like a cloud releasing the moon, which had been hidden behind it for a while, the Maya, which had eclipsed even the mind of Krishna, slid away, and he realized that it was a trick played by Salva. Like a man does not see the world of dreams when he gets up, even so Krishna did not see the messenger from the city, nor could he see the body of his father which had fallen on the ground a while back. Krishna was furious with himself more than even with Salva. That he should have been deceived by the Maya cast by this contemptible man was too much for Krishna. Krishna tried to kill Salva, who had found refuge in his Saubha. After toying with him for a while, Krishna found that the time had come when he had to finish the sport. Krishna broke the armor of Salva with his arrows. He then broke his bow and the jewel which he was wearing on his head. Along with this, Krishna hit the chariot Saubha with his gada and crushed it to dust. It was amazing that the so-called unbreakable Saubha should have been broken so easily. Salva now stood on the ground with his gada upraised. Krishna took up his charaka and chakra and with a twist of his wrist sent it spinning. The head of Salva with its jeweled crown fell on the ground. There was great joy in the heart of each one of the men who had been fighting. They had been fighting for the last so many days on the battlefield. Dantavakra, one of the remaining friends of Shishupala, now came on the field to fight with Krishna. He was also a cousin of Krishna as Shishupala was. Dantavakra thought that he should avenge the death of his brother Shishupala and his friends, Paundraka and now Salva. They had all been companions who had been inseparable. Dantavakra was fond of using the gada while fighting. He came to Krishna and straightway began to fight with him. He hit Krishna with his gada. Unruffled by this sudden attack, Krishna took up his own gada by name Kaumodaki and with it hit his opponent Dantavakra on the chest. The lifeless form of the man Dantavakra fell on the ground like a fallen palm tree. From the dead form emanated a glow and travelled towards the feet of Krishna, where it got lost. The three births of the doorkeepers of Narayana were now at an end. They were now restored to their old place by the side of Lord, never to leave him any more. Viduratha, the brother of Dantavakra, came to the field, and in a matter of moments his head had also been severed and it lay on the battlefield. The long battle was at an end and the Yadavas entered the city in triumph. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Paramastu. Chapter 254 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Krishna and Sudama. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There was a Brahmin who was a great devotee of Krishna. In his young days, he had been the companion of Krishna in the Gurukula of Sandipini. Years had passed and they had not dealt kindly with him. He was a man of simple taste and he had no desires. His senses were under control and he had no attachment to worldly things. He was very poor, but he was satisfied with anything he got, and he never blamed fate or the gods for his poverty. He was fortunate in his wife, who was similar to him in her qualities. She was lean and devoted as she was to her husband. She would eat only what was left after he ate. And necessarily, considering their poverty, she had very little to eat. Constant fasting had made her lean, but her face had the same tranquil look which her husband had. They were called Sudama and Kalyani. Once, however, she could not bear to see the sufferings of her husband because of poverty. After great deliberations, she made up her mind to talk to him. She went and stood before him and, with a hesitant voice, she began to talk to him. Her words were halting and her voice was so soft that he could not even hear them properly. She said, "My lord, you have often told me that Krishna, the Lord of Dwaraka, was once your friend and playmate. He is a great prince now. He is reputed to be very considerate towards Brahmins and about those who have surrendered themselves to him. His spouse is goddess Lakshmi herself, and is there any doubt about his immense wealth? Sudama looked at her and felt sorry for her. She was wearing the simplest of garments, and it was torn in several places, as his own was too. She had not had a full meal ever since she had married him, and yet never once had she complained. Now it was evident that she was trying to ask for something. He waited for her to continue. After some hesitation, she said, "My lord, why should you not go and see him? He is sure to give you wealth if he sees you. He is now in Dwaraka, surrounded by all his kinsmen. He will surely be happy to see you and relieve you of your poverty, which is killing you." She stood silent, afraid lest she had spoken too much. She did not dare to lift up her eyes. Sudama felt sorry for her. This was the first time she had asked for something, and even that because she wanted to see him happy, comfortable. He told himself, "I will please her and go. Incidentally, I will be very happy since I will be seeing my friend after many years. We can sit and talk about the days of our boyhood, and we are sure to enjoy our meeting after these many years." He spoke to his wife and said that he would go, and added, "Kalyani, have you anything in the house which I can take as a gift? I cannot go empty-handed." Quietly, she went out of the presence of her husband and went to the house of the neighbor. She asked the housewife if she had anything to give her. She had to refuse since she did not have anything. Kalyani walked out of the house with disappointment. The man of the house came in just then, and he asked his wife about the lady who walked and with so much sadness writ on her face. His wife told him what she had wanted and how she could not comply with her wishes. He said, "Lady, please wait." And he took a handful of rice which he had brought home tied in his upper cloth. She accepted it with gratitude. She realized that it would not be enough. So she went to 3 more houses and asked for just a fistful of rice in every house. She thus collected 4 handfuls and no more. She thought that this was all she was fated to go. She was fated to get. With great care, she beaten the rice, tied it up in an old piece of cloth, and gave it to her husband. Taking the small bundle in his hand, the poor Brahmin Sudama left his home with great joy in his mind, since he was going to see his friend, and at the same time he was worried about how he was going to get an audience with Krishna. It was not the old playmate Krishna he was going to see. It was now Krishna, a member of the royal household, and not just his companion of the long ago. Perhaps the doorkeepers would not let him in. How could he announce himself? They would laugh if he told them that he was a friend of Krishna, a very dear friend. But that was what he had been, and he smiled to himself, thinking of the days which they had spent together. Even as he was thinking of the Lord and his meeting with him, Sudama found that he was in Dwaraka. Evidently, Krishna, knowing that he was coming to see him, transported him by his Maya to Dwaraka in a short time. Sudama looked around and stood admiring the beauty of the city. He reached the section where the army was placed, and, crossing that, he passed 3 wide and large roads and found several glorious mansions there. He entered one which seemed more beautiful than the others, and no one stopped him. He passed the doorway and reached the inner hall. There, he stood rooted to the spot and he could not move. His eyes were drinking in the scene. He saw Krishna seated on a beautiful seat with his dear Rukmini by his side. Even as he entered, Krishna jumped out of his seat and ran towards Sudama. He embraced him warmly. There were tears in the eyes of Krishna, and they spilled out like drops of water from a lotus. Sudama was weeping openly with joy at the reunion. Krishna took both his hands in his own and led him to the seat which he had been using. He washed the worn feet of Sudama and he sprinkled the water on his own head and that of Rukmini. He gave the fan made of the feathers of peacock to Rukmini, who stood by the side of the poor Brahmin. She fanned him while Krishna cooled his limbs with sandal paste and perfumed water. The people in the apartments were watching Krishna and the poor, emaciated frame of the Brahmin, who was all skin and bone, whose clothes were old, dirty, and torn in several places. His face was sad and his skin was dry, and he looked like a beggar. And the Lord of Lords washed his feet and took the water on his head as though it were some tirtha. How fortunate was this man that he should be honored so by Krishna. Thoughts like these passed through the minds of those who were standing by. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamast. Chapter 255 of Shrimadbhagavatam. Do you remember? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna sat by his side and holding his hand in his, spoke to Sudama about the many happy days they had spent together in the Gurukula of Sandipini. Happy days they had been. Do you remember? Do you remember was the beginning of each one of the sentences each one of them spoke. So they sat for a long time. Krishna then said, Sudama, my friend, how have you been all these days? After going back to your home from the Gurukula, did you get married? Is your wife as gentle and good as you are? You have never been very fond of the things of this world, and so you seem to have abandoned the ordinary pleasures of the world which other men pursue so eagerly. Tell me, I want to know all that has been happening to you. Krishna looked at the distress writ on the face of his friend and pretended not to have noticed it, and without giving a chance to his friend to talk, he said, Do you think often of the days we spent in the home of our Guru? A father who gives birth is the first Guru, and the preceptor who initiates us into the world of knowledge is the second Guru, and this second Guru has to be honored more. The one who has taught us the path of Brahma Vidya to realize the Brahman, that teacher is our third Guru. My friend, do you remember one of the many incidents which happened when we were in the Gurukula? Our mother, our Guru's wife, had asked us to go to the forest to collect samit, the twigs used to feed the fire. We were wandering in the forest and suddenly, without warning, there was a heavy rain. A stormy wind was blowing and the thunder and lightning frightened us. The sun had set and there was darkness all around us. We were not able to make out the pitfalls in the path we were wandering in because of the rain and the darkness. Clinging to each other, we wandered all around the forest since we had lost our way. So passed the whole night. Sudama took up the story and said, Yes, early in the morning, as soon as the sun had risen, our Guru, who had been worried about us, came to the forest in search of us and found us with great difficulty. Krishna said, He was overcome with compassion for us, and he said, O my sons, what a lot of suffering you have undergone for my sake. The best way to pay respect to one's Guru is to serve him without thinking of one's own bodily comforts. And you have all done that. The only way in which I can bless you is by saying that all your desires will be granted. All the lessons you have learnt from me will reward you in this life and in the life after. Sudama, I can never forget that night we spent together. Incidents like this were remembered by both of them, and time passed pleasantly for both. Krishna, who knew the mind of everyone, who loved Brahmins more than his kinsmen even, who was the ultimate solace of all who need comfort, who was the Lord of Lords, knew what had brought Sudama to Dwaraka. But he wanted to tease his friend, so he said, "My dear friend, what have you brought for me from your home?" Sudama was silent. He was feeling ashamed of the tiny bundle of cloth which held a fried rice. But Krishna would not let him change the subject. "Perhaps you have brought me something very simple. Perhaps you think it is not rich enough for these surroundings. But, Sudama, do you not know that to me, what is given with love and bhakti is very dear, even if it is a small gift, smaller than an atom? A gift which is not accompanied by bhakti will never please me. But let it be a flower, a leaf, a fruit, or even a drop of water. If it is offered to me with bhakti by one whose mind is pure and is without sin, that is what is dear to me, and I will accept it with love. Give me what you have brought." Patram pushpam phalam thoyam ye me bhaktya prayuchyate. Even then, Sudama was feeling shy. Krishna thought to himself, "My poor friend has been poor all these years, and yet he has never once thought of asking me to help him. Because of his wife's insistence, he has come to me. I must grant him what he has not asked me for." Krishna waited for his friend to give him something, as though he were a child waiting for a gift from his mother. He then caught hold of Sudama's upper cloth and said, "Look, my sister has sent me something which you do not want to give me." And he opened the tiny bundle which contained the beaten rice full of chaff and little specks of dust. The wife and Sudama did not have time to clean it even. Such was the hurry with which Sudama left for the city of his friend. Krishna clapped his hands in glee and said, "Sudama, so you remember that this fried rice is a great favorite of mine. Remember your sharing yours with me in those days?" Sudama smiled since he remembered the incident. In the meantime, Krishna took up a handful of the rice and was munching it with great enjoyment. When he had swallowed a mouthful, he took up another fistful and was about to take it near his lips, when Rukmini, who was Lakshmi Devi herself, caught his hand and stopped him with a smile. With her eyes, she spoke to him and said, "My lord, the one handful which you have already eaten is enough to fill the house of your bhakta with all the wealth of the world. Another mouthful and I will also have to go away from you and stay in his house." Sudama saw none of this. He was happy in the company of his friend, and the whole night they spent happily together. Early in the morning, when the sun had risen, Sudama thought that he should not strain the hospitality of Krishna too much and said, "I have been wanting to see you for a long time. Krishna, I have heard that you have done great deeds and that you are an honored prince and that you are the beloved cousin of the great Pandavas. I have been keeping track of news of you, and I do not have to tell you that I think of you day and night. I will have to go back now, but only my body will go. I will leave my heart behind with you." Krishna and his wives prostrated before Sudama, and then he left for his home. Krishna walked part of the way with him and went back after a tender leave taking. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnar Pranamast. Chapter 256 of Shrimadbhagavatam. A handful of rice. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sudama felt ashamed of himself when he thought of the reason for his coming to Dwaraka. He felt happy that he had the good sense not to ask Krishna for anything. With his mind thinking back on the dreamlike experience he had of having spent a day with Krishna, Sudama reached his own city. His body thrilled even now when he thought how warmly Krishna had embraced him, a poor Brahmin wearing torn, dirty old clothes. I am the lowest of the low, and he is the Lord of lords, and yet he embraced me. Is it not wonderful? Again, Sudama spoke to himself. His chest, which is the abode of Lakshmi, touched this hard and bony chest of mine, and his eyes were full of tears of love when he embraced me. He made me sit on his own cot, and his wife fanned me with her tender hands. He touched these feet of mine, feet full of dust and full of corns, and rough with walking on the ground incessantly. And these feet he took in his hands, washed them, and took the water and placed it on his head. Can anything be more gracious than this gesture of my friend? For those who have found refuge in his feet, nothing is impossible. I know why he did not give me anything else but his love. He knows that the possession of wealth is the easiest way to make a man forget him. And Krishna loves me so much, he does not want me to forget him. How infinite is his goodness to me! Sudama was approaching his house. He was attracted by the sight of a beautiful mansion, which was seen from a distance. He thought to himself, what a beautiful sight! I have never seen it before. It seems to be made of light, so lovely it is. It seems to be so near my house, and yet, how is it I have not noticed it all these years? Am I so absent-minded as all that? If I remember right, all my neighbors are like me, and no one has wealth enough to have a house like this. With his mind busy with thoughts like these, he was walking when several people who looked like divine beings received him and took him to the door of the house. Have I come back to Dwaraka? Sudama asked himself, and when he looked up and down, his wife, looking like the goddess Lakshmi, came forward to the door and falling at his feet, welcomed him with tears. He was amazed at the sight of his wife looking so beautiful and so much like a woman from the heavens. He entered his house, which was like the mansion of Indra. He stood silent while his eyes took in the picture. His mind was busy with thoughts which chased each other. He told himself, it is the good fortune of having seen the Lord, which has blessed me with so much wealth. Krishna, the Yadava, Krishna, my friend and playmate, was seen by me in his rich surroundings. He gives even when his favor is not solicited. And this way of his giving is like the bounty of the rain cloud. The cloud, though it is capable of filling up the entire ocean with water, is so humble about the good it wants to do that it works silently, and when a farmer is sleeping, it pours rain on his crops without letting him know that it has come and gone. Krishna does not want to talk about the wealth that he is capable of giving, since to him it is such a minor matter. He considers love and bhakti to be much superior to wealth. And so, he never did want to talk to me about this. He did not want to embarrass me by saying, I will give you wealth. Since he does not consider wealth to be equal to bhakti, and in his eyes I saw that my love for him seemed to please him so much. To him, the handful of rice I took was dearer than all the nectar and honey which was there for him in plenty. With these thoughts, Sudama accepted the gift of the Lord, and with his wife he enjoyed the wealth that was granted to him. All the while, however, he and his wife were ever devoted to Krishna, and his feet were ever placed in their hearts. Gradually, they practiced the art of detachment from worldly things, unaffected by the earlier poverty and now the later wealth. The Brahmin couple lived happily with their minds full of thoughts of Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnarpanamastu.